Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's quick tips on reinstalling an outboard lower unit. The main tool I use to help with this install on bigger outboards anyway is one of these little ratchet straps. They got the two hooks, so all I do is just hook one on each side of the cowling, like that. And it gives you a bit of a loop below. The next thing I do is just put a little bit of marine grease on the drive shaft. That just helps it slide in and also stops it corroding into the end of the crankshaft and the power head. Then I also put a little bit of marine grease around the fitting here where the hose, the outlet from the water pump goes. It's slightly funneled, this part, but it just stops it catching. It means that as soon as it gets vaguely in the right position, it's going to help it slide into place. And every little bit of help you can get goes a long way when you're putting these in. Now, when I took this out, I had the outboard in reverse and the gearbox in reverse. The reason I have that rather than being in neutral is it means that if I turn the prop, the drive shaft will turn. And that can be really important because if the splines end up hitting each other, you need to be able to turn that drive shaft just a little bit to make sure that the peaks and the troughs line up and you can slot it in. So what I'm going to do now is just start feeding it up. And then I'm going to bring this ratchet strap out and under here. And just crank it a few times. Now that strap's taking all the weight of the gearbox, so I don't have to worry about it dropping back out, anything like that. Another thing I think is really worth having with you is just a little pen light. So I'll show you all the things we've got to line up. In here now, I've got to reconnect this hose to the barb here, which is the speedo sender. Then this spline section needs to come up to here, where the gearbox goes. And then here, this hose here has to come down into this section here, which is where I put the grease on. Because there's some excess length in this hose, I can actually push this on with the gearbox still quite low down. So I'm going to get some pliers, bring that on and put a cable tie, and then that part of it's done with. It's worth keeping your torch on hand so you can keep looking up in there as the outboard gets higher. All I'm going to do now is start using the ratchet strap to keep pulling the gearbox up. But what I need to do is make sure everything lines up. Up here, for example, you can see this gear selector. This part flops around a little bit, so I've got to make sure when this comes up, it slots into here. So I may need to use something quite slim to reach in and just position this. Once the start of it's just inside here, it's kind of home and hose, so that's fine. Now as I'm pushing up on it, it's reached a point where it's hit quite a hard stop. And that's generally because the splines on the drive shaft aren't lining up with the splines on the crankshaft. And this is where it helps to have it in gear, because I can push on it, and then by just turning the prop a little bit, I've helped those splines rotate, and as soon as they've rotated and lined up, it's able to slide in. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get the camera in to show you, because it's quite a small gap. But if I shine the torch in, what I can see is where the spline from the gearbox comes up to the gear selector, they're actually not mated, they're beside each other. So I'm going to have to drop it back down a little bit, now that I know that the drive shaft's aligned. Drop it down, focus on getting those lined up, and push it up again. So that time I came just down past, wriggled the gearbox till it was locked in, and now I'll push up again. That seems to have gone up quite nicely, so those drive shafts stayed aligned. Now I'm just going to crank the ratchet again. Now that ratchet strap's holding the outboard in place, and I can just start putting the bolts in.